I'm 33 years old and go by Alexis. I recently came out of an extremely trying experience, and I want to tell you about my trip. This story starts with Russell, my ex-husband, and his mother Lori. When Russell and I first met in college, we clicked right away, and our relationship quickly took off. 5.5 years later, we tied the knot. Although we enjoyed a close relationship, there was one individual who cast a shadow, my mother-in-law Lori. Lori made it very evident how much she detested me right from the beginning when Russell introduced us. My worries about my appearance made her critiques and insults much more painful. Nonetheless, I found some solace in the thought that Russell loved me because of who I really was. After 3 years of marriage, I made the decision to resign from my work and start a business with my closest buddy. Russell was encouraging, even though it was a risky move. Our company started out slowly but expanded over time, making a profit that allowed us to live comfortably. Even after I was successful, Lori didn't change her attitude towards me. She still downplayed my achievements and even accused me of harming her son. Our relationship was strained, and we frequently argued as a result of Russell's quiet during her outbursts. His lack of defense of me, in my opinion, has just made our differences deeper. After reading a text on Russell's phone, I learned that Lori had been trying to set him up with other women, which made things worse. As I read their emails, which were full of disparaging remarks about me, my heart fell. Russell rejected his mother's efforts to find him a partner at first, but eventually he started to express interest in the ladies she suggested. I was left feeling incredibly upset and doubting the basis of our relationship after learning this. Deeply worried, I decided to tell Russell what I had found, and I planned to do it the next day after work. But things took an unexpected turn that day. I was driving to work 1 minute, and the next I was waking up in a hospital bed with nurses watching over me and beeping machines all around me. My thirst was unbearable, and my head was hammering. I was weak, yet I was able to ask for water. I tried to sleep again after drinking water in the hopes that it might help with the headache. I tried to move my legs to make myself more comfortable, but to my surprise, they remained in place. Confusion initially took hold, and then terror struck fast after. I explained that I was having trouble feeling my legs and I needed a nurse immediately. The doctor was quickly notified by the nurse, and tests were performed to evaluate my feeling. Russell entered the room at this critical moment, his worry evident as he attempted to comprehend the circumstances. The doctor told me the terrible news. After running more tests, I was paralyzed. Russell, probably overcome with anxiety and despair, departed the room. I struggled with this drastically different reality by myself. Seeing that my mind was racing, the doctor sensed my distress and encouraged me to take some time off, even though I refused to believe that I could sleep. He informed me that even with the severity of my spinal injury, there was still a hope for rehabilitation and that the drug would help me rest. The knowledge that any improvement would be gradual and labor-intensive offset this ray of hope. Though there was a lot to take in from the news, there was a glimmer of optimism among the utter sadness. I was aware of the difficulty that lay ahead, but I was committed to overcoming my paralysis. The physician stressed the value of diet and relaxation for my complete recuperation, which includes the healing of further injuries I received in the collision. This talk strengthened my will to fight for my recovery by offering me a glimmer of hope that my illness might not be irreversible. The nurses gave me an update on the accident shortly after the doctor left. At an intersection, my car was broadside, resulting in a crash that left me with serious injuries like bruising on my face, a shattered collarbone, and damage to my spinal cord. It was alarming to find that I had been unconscious for 2 weeks. Mixed emotions were stirred when it was revealed that an arrested drunk driver was the cause of the collision. My initial feelings were one of rage and fury, but I found some solace in the knowledge that justice was being carried out. I promptly dozed off after eating and taking the prescription, which was as strong as the doctor had warned. When I woke up the following day, the only sound in the room was the constant buzz of medical equipment. At that moment, I spotted my mother taking a quick break in a chair. She woke up to my attempt to attract her attention. The mixture of relief, affection, and concern on her face as she came to me was palpable. Tears and loving gestures filled the air at our emotional reunion, expressing the depth of our mutual relief and dread. The presence of my mother gave me great comfort and served as a reminder of the network of support I received during my battle for recovery. I was thankful to be here and feeling a mixture of remorse and relief as I struggled through the consequences of my experience. I took hold of my mother's hand, turned the page, and inquired about her health. She responded with a gentle grin and the type of love that only a mother could provide, putting my suffering ahead of hers. She was relieved that the medicine was keeping the worst of the pain away from me, but it was clear from her voice that she was worried for my future and safety. She tried to be strong, but her worry showed a weakness that resonated with me. I tried to calm her down by assuring her that I was being cautious, but her thoughts about how unjust my circumstances were brought to light the erratic nature of life's obstacles. We talked about recovery and how we clung to optimism in spite of the unknown. Regardless of how well I recovered, my mom's continuous support was a ray of hope. But the thought of Russell cast a pall on our little exchange. His absence from the disaster was excruciating, especially after he found out that I was paralyzed. My mother, equally perplexed as she was worried, swore to talk to him, her protective nature taking over. I felt a wave of sadness and betrayal over Russell's absence as sleep started to capture me again. His quick conversation prior to the diagnosis and his abrupt departure raised concerns about his support and dedication. When I woke up, I saw my mother on the phone, having an angry conversation with demanding, pointed comments. The affects of my medication had worn off, leaving me to face the pain head-on with a pounding in my skull. I called a nurse right away, and she gave me the medicine I needed to feel better. After the agony passed, I became curious and asked who my mother had said those hurtful words to. My mother dismissed my worries, obviously upset at first, but I could tell how deeply uncomfortable she was. After some gentle prodding, she disclosed that she had been having arguments with Russell, who had been out with friends. Beyond the physical wounds I was receiving, there was an additional layer of hurt upon realizing that he had not spent much time with me while I was unconscious. He was being so callous about my accident that my mother had had enough and had even chastised him for handling my near-death experience with such disregard. She had issued a directive for him to come visit within the next hour, which I thought was both awkward and essential. When Russell did ultimately arrive, Lori was with him, which made me feel much more uneasy. It was hard enough that I didn't have his backing, and the last thing I wanted was Lori around. Sensing the tension, my mother excused herself so we could have a conversation. When I confronted Russell about his negligence, Lori responded with icy disdain, implying that I was worthless to Russell because of my disability. She came clean and said that Russell had thought about sticking by my side until she talked him out of it, using our past relationship problems and my incapacity to support myself financially because of my paralysis as excuses for their cold-blooded viewpoint. This painful realization highlighted the brittleness of our relationship and the harsh truth of my current situation. Russell revealed to me, quite painfully, that my paralysis had changed his readiness to honor our agreement to assist one another in good times and bad. I was shocked by his candid disclosure, which was colored by Lori's critical viewpoint. Lori was quick to say that she thought Russell deserved more, blaming my value only on my now perilous financial performance. It was blatantly treacherous of them to be willing to desert me when I needed them, especially after Russell announced he was going to serve divorce papers and Lori happily set up a date for him right away. My mother came back as they were departing, leaving me to deal with the heartbreaking truth of their desertion. Her presence gave me a little solace while I described the terrible conversation. She was enraged, and it showed how much she loved me. She was a rock of support for me as I sobbed till sleep kindly took me, even though she was unable to face them in time. It felt like a formality when the divorce papers arrived the following day. As I signed them, I couldn't help but notice Lori's victory and Russell's seeming relief. It was a bitter reminder of the harshness of being abandoned by someone I believed loved me, particularly at such a vulnerable time. The following weeks were gloomy and characterized by severe depression. It seemed as though something essential had been taken from me, taking all the color out of my existence. Nevertheless, my mother was a silent pillar of support for me at this period, providing solace in the shape of my favorite foods, and beautiful flowers. Her behavior was a silent declaration of her steadfast support. Even as I started to navigate the world anew, beginning with the recovery of my physical injuries and preparing for the challenges ahead, her presence gave me the strength to confront each day. Following my diagnosis and Russell's subsequent desertion, I was given the all-clear to start physical therapy and a drug regimen designed to help manage my paralysis. My appointments with a licensed physical therapist were set to begin in a week. To be honest, my first thought was one of defeat. I felt like giving up and staying in bed, giving in to my sadness. I was so depressed that I missed my first several therapy sessions as a result of this. But my mom could take no more of my hopelessness. She came up to me and told me how frustrated she was with my never-ending whining. She persisted that I could, at least partially, alter my situation, even when I expressed my feelings of being completely defeated. She questioned my inaction, saying that taking any action, no matter how tiny, was preferable to doing nothing. It really resonated with her proposal that I could take back some control over my life, maybe even find a method to disprove Russell and Lori. She urged me to take advantage of the fact that, despite my diminished physical capabilities, my mind and soul were unharmed. I reluctantly agreed to start working from home after taking her advice, in part to please her and in part to get away from her constant urging. Unexpectedly, this choice was a turning point. With the help of my best friend and business partner, who had kept things running throughout my absence, I was able to return to my job in the company. Despite being few because of our business commitments, her visits served as a reminder of the world outside my self-imposed seclusion. This modest move towards action marked the beginning of a long process of healing and self-reassertion, propelled by my mother's unflinching support and the realization that giving up on hope would not make the hurt go away but would rather make it worse. Our staff graciously welcomed me back when I eased the workload on my business partner by going back to work. They expressed relief at having me involved again, as well as concern. To my mother's pleasure, I immediately found myself back in the swing of things at work after assuring them of my well-being. My dedication to physical therapy, which I attended 4 times a week, reflected this improvement. Even though it was embarrassing and hard at first, I was determined to keep going. The unexpected announcement of Russell's remarriage on Facebook served as the impetus for a rekindled feeling of purpose. The post, with its hardly disguised jab at our history, gave me a strong drive to not only get better but also do better than I had ever done. This fit of rage turned into a driving force that inspired my commitment. The next 5 years were a difficult struggle. For the first 3 years, my main goal was to learn how to walk again, which I did with the use of a cane. I spent the next 5 years working on my business, which is a monument to my perseverance and hard work, and I helped it achieve notable success and recognition. But contentment escaped me until an unforeseen chance for vengeance materialized. Russell's business was failing. By a strange turn of events, my business was able to propose a merger that would give us a commanding lead. We successfully completed the merger on conditions that gave us a sizable amount of control. Russell's expression of disbelief when I stepped into his office for our first meeting after the merger, cane in hand but still standing tall, was a silent victory. Years of hardship, betrayal, anguish, and labor had brought me to this point, which not only represents a personal victory but also the start of a new chapter in my career. One where the old grudges may be settled once and for all. With a confident gait and heels clicking with every step, I entered the room representing my full recovery. A far cry from the impression Russell had of me when I first announced that I would be the new CEO. I described the impending organizational reorganizations, implying a more compact team structure. The message was evident, especially to Russell, who was the front-runner for termination, even though the ramifications were wide. After the meeting, Russell confronted me, his amazement and perplexity overwhelming him. I explained that his absence had prevented him from learning of my potential for recovery, in response to his incredulity at my recovery, which he framed with an accusation of dishonesty. A potential realized to the fullest. His notion that my motivation should be revenge was met with the same icy indifference he had showed me, demonstrating that my goals and endeavors were far more important to me than any desire for small-time vengeance. His request for Professionalism was greeted with insight, even as it revealed a personal growth on childbearing. It was not the time to bring up the past. It was about taking a stride forward, claiming my resilience and power in the face of difficulty, and proving that my accomplishments and healing were not bound by the past, but rather served as stepping stones towards a future I was creating for myself. Russell repeated the exact lines he had used to undermine our relationship as he begged for his job, citing a need for stability in light of his upcoming parenthood. The irony of his plea did not, however, change my mind. I told him that his employment was coming to an end and that his letter of termination was already written. His response, which was a mixture of shock and outrage, was a mirror image of my own sense of abandonment when I left him to deal with the fallout from his actions. In sharp contrast to my previous feelings of vulnerability, I experienced a wave of empowerment. Later that day, Laura's attempts to demonize me through messages and calls simply served to confirm that what I had done was right. I responded to her attacks by reminding her of how she contributed to the breakdown of my marriage and general well-being. Even though it was a sour conversation, it demonstrated how I had changed from being powerless to determined and strong. The validation of my perseverance, rather than just the retaliation, was what made this win so wonderful. Throughout this journey, the encouragement and support I got at my lowest points was crucial. I learned a very important lesson from this experience: there is only upward movement when one is at their lowest. I left the shadows of my past behind with every stride I took, forging a future shaped by my fortitude, tenacity, and newly discovered freedom.